Today we're looking at Apollo 13, a mission name most people know, but maybe not for its original scientific goals.
That's right. More for the, let's say, unexpected detour home.
Exactly. We've got our sources here covering the mission from start to, well, the very different finish. The plan was April 1970, Apollo 13 heading for the moon.
Yep, launched April 11th. It was supposed to be the third moon landing, targeting a region called Fra Mauro. Lots of scientific interest there.
Right. Ex Luna, Scientia from the moon, knowledge. That was the mission motto. They thought Fra Mauro held clues about the moon's early history, from a massive impact.
Mm-hmm. And they were carrying the ALSEP, the Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments package, serious gear seismometers, heat flow experiments, meant to radio back data for years.
All set for discovery. Lovell and Haise were going to do these long moonwalks, explore Cone Crater, deploy all that equipment.
The launch itself was, well, mostly smooth. A bit of an issue with one engine on the second stage, but they compensated. Everything looked pretty routine initially.
Transposition, docking, setting the third stage on a crash course with the moon for seismic measurements.
Yeah.
All standard procedure at that point.
Yeah, calibrating the seismometer left by Apollo 12. So they were settling in for the 3-day coast to the moon.
And then, almost 56 hours in, things changed. Dramatically.
That's when they heard it. Jim Lovell reported, okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. Soon followed by the famous, Houston, we've had a problem.
Preceded by that pretty large bang, which turned out to be catastrophic. An oxygen tank in the service module exploded.
And this wasn't just about breathing air, although that was part of it. The crucial thing was the fuel cells. They combined hydrogen and oxygen to generate electricity, and water.
So losing the oxygen tanks meant losing their main source of power. And water. The command module, Odyssey, basically became unusable for the long haul.
Absolutely. They had to power Odyssey down, completely saving its batteries for re-entry. Their only option was the lunar module, Aquarius.
The LM. Designed for 2 guys on the moon for a couple of days. Suddenly it's a lifeboat for 3 men for, 4 days?
Yeah, something like that. The moon landing was obviously off. Instantly. The mission objective became starkly simple. Get them home alive.
Okay, so let's talk about that return journey, because that's where the real story unfolds, isn't it? The ingenuity.
It really is. First big decision. How to get back. Using the service module engine was too risky. Who knew what damage it had sustained?
Right, so they decided to loop around the moon, use its gravity.
The free return trajectory. But they weren't actually on a perfect free return path anymore because of earlier course corrections for the From Mauro landing.
Ah, okay, so they couldn't just coast.
No, they needed a burn.
Yeah.
And the only engine they could trust was the lunar module's descent propulsion system, the DPS, the one meant to land them on the moon.
Wow, using the landing engine to push them back towards Earth.
Exactly. That burn put them onto the correct path around the moon. But even that path wasn't quite right for splashdown.
What do you mean?
It would have brought them down in the Indian Ocean, far from the recovery forces, so they needed another burn.
Using the LM engine again?
Yes. This was the PC+2 burn 2 hours after their closest approach to the moon. This burn was critical. It shortened the return trip and adjusted the landing target to the Pacific.
And that PC+2 burn actually sent them further from Earth than any crewed mission before or since, didn't it?
That's the one. Over 400,000 kilometers out. Just incredible, considering the circumstances. And navigating these burns, that was another huge challenge.
How so?
Well, the explosion created a cloud of debris around them. Using the stars for alignment the normal way was basically impossible.
So what did they do?
They had to improvise, using the sun as a reference point, even citing the crescent Earth or moon in the LM's small window. Real seat-of-the-pants navigation.
Incredible. But inside the LM, things were getting pretty desperate, right? Life support wasn't designed for this.
Not at all. The big worry was carbon dioxide. The LM had canisters with lithium hydroxide to scrub CO2, but only enough for 2 guys for 2 days.
And now there were 3 guys for 4 days.
Exactly. The canisters were getting saturated fast, CO2 levels were rising.
And this is where the ground crews really shone, wasn't it? The famous mailbox.
Oh, yeah. Mission Control realized the command module had plenty of unused square CO2 canisters, but the LM used round ones. The shapes didn't match.
So they had to figure out how to fit a square peg in a round hole, literally using only materials the astronauts had on board.
Right. They gathered up everything identical to what was on the spacecraft plastic bags, cardboard from logbooks, hoses, lots of duct tape, and figured out how to build an adapter.
And they radioed the instructions up. An amazing piece of improvisation.
Truly. It worked, and it probably saved their lives. But that wasn't the only hardship. Power was incredibly tight.
Because the LM ran on batteries, not the command module's fuel cells.
Precisely. They had to power down almost everything. Non-essential systems, heaters, everything.
Which meant it got cold. Really cold.
Down to near freezing, maybe 3 degrees Celsius sometimes. Condensation formed on the walls. Sleep was almost impossible.
And water rationing. That must have been brutal.
Extremely. About 0.2 liters per person per day. Just a few sips. They lost a lot of weight, became dehydrated. Fred Haise developed a serious kidney infection because of it.
Just surviving those conditions while also needing to stay sharp for critical procedures.
Yeah.
It's hard to fathom.
It really is. And one of the most critical procedures was yet to come, powering the command module Odyssey back up for re-entry.
Which had never been done before, right? Powering it up from a completely cold state in space.
Never. It wasn't designed for that. The sequence had to be invented on the ground, figuring out which systems to bring online, in what order, using the absolute minimum power from the re-entry batteries.
Guys like John Aaron, Ken Mattingly, who'd been swapped out pre-flight.
Yeah.
They worked tirelessly on this.
Absolutely. They simulated it over and over. The procedure they relayed up had to be perfect, and the crew had to execute it perfectly, which they did. Test pilot skill really counted there.
Even then, there were more course corrections needed, right?
Yeah.
Using the LM's tiny thrusters.
Yes, small tweaks. They even used the Earth's terminator, that line between night and day, as a visual reference for one correction. Another ad hoc technique.
Then came jettisoning the service module. That must have been a moment.
It was the first time they actually saw the damage. Lovell famously said, "There's one whole side of that spacecraft missing." Just confirmed how lucky they'd been.
And one last hurdle. Getting rid of the lunar module Aquarius before re-entry, the normal procedure involved the service module they just ditched.
Right. Another problem for the ground to solve. They figured out a way using air pressure in the tunnel between the two spacecraft to push the LM away safely.
Ingenuity right up to the very end.
Absolutely. Then Odyssey hit the atmosphere, the blackout, and finally, splashdown. April 17th, 1970, safe in the Pacific.
The successful failure, as Lovell called it. They didn't land on the moon, didn't get the science.
But they achieved something maybe even more profound. They brought the crew home from the bronc. It's often called NASA's finest hour, for a reason.
That teamwork between the crew and mission control, the sheer problem-solving under unimaginable pressure. It's an incredible story.
And the world watched. Interest in space, which had kind of dipped after Apollo 11, spiked again. Everyone was rooting for them.
So when we look back at Apollo 13, this mission forced by crisis away from its goal of lunar exploration. What does it really tell us?
Well, it's a powerful lesson, isn't it? About human resilience, about innovation born from necessity. You have to wonder, does this incredible story of survival, of overcoming the unexpected, resonate maybe even more deeply than if it had just been another routine moon landing? What does that say about what we value and our capacity when things go wrong?